Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Have you ever walked away from talking with someone feeling completely drained, manipulated, or even violated, yet couldn't quite put your finger on why? Damn dung. That uncomfortable feeling is actually your intuition trying to tell you something important. Today, we're diving into something that honestly changed my life when I first learned about it. And I think it might change yours too. We're talking about what psychologists call the Dark Triad traits. And trust me, once you see these patterns, you can never unsee them. But before we go further, I need to give you a quick heads up. What I'm about to share is typically only taught in advanced psychology courses and rarely discussed publicly. I'm providing this strictly for defensive purposes. Using these techniques to manipulate others is not only unethical, but can cause serious harm. Let me paint a picture for you. Behind some of the most charming smiles and confident personalities lurks a shadow self that plays by entirely different rules than yours. While you're playing checkers, they're playing chess. And they've been studying your moves since the moment you met. And get this, the average person falls victim to these tactics 4-5 times every single day without ever realizing it. Pretty scary, right? The Dark Triad, the perfect storm of dangerous psychology. Alright, so let's break this down. The Dark Triad was first identified by researchers back in 2002. And it represents this deadly combination of 3 personality traits that create literally the most dangerous people you'll ever meet in your life. And the scariest part? These aren't the obvious threats you can see coming. These people operate behind perfectly crafted masks of normalcy. I'm going to walk you through each component, starting with the most common and moving to the absolute worst. Narcissism, the entry-level predator. This is the one most people think they understand, but trust me, most get it completely wrong. Think about that person who walks into a room and somehow immediately becomes the center of attention. Not because they're genuinely interesting, but because they've mastered making everything about them. The narcissist lives in a reality where they're the main character and everyone else just supporting actors in their movie. You know, at its core, narcissism involves an inflated sense of self-importance, this desperate need for constant admiration, almost no real empathy, and super fragile self-esteem hidden behind grandiose behaviors. I was reading this book by Dr. Sam Vaknin called Malignant Self-Love, where he describes narcissism as self-supply through others. This is key, guys. The narcissist doesn't actually love themselves. They're obsessed with the reflection of themselves they see in your reactions. I actually worked with someone like this. I'll call him Michael. He was this mid-level manager at a tech company I consulted for. When his team succeeded, he'd be quick to take credit in meetings with upper management. When they failed, he'd subtly shift blame to team members. The guy maintained this impeccable professional image, complete with carefully curated social media that portrayed him as a thought leader and innovator. You could see it in his colleagues' faces. They'd feel inexplicably drained after interactions with him. They noticed he only showed interest in their work when it benefited him, and he seemed incapable of genuine congratulations when they succeeded independently. His relationships were shallow, just dominated by competition rather than connection. You might be wondering, what makes these people so dangerous? Well, narcissists are masters of first impressions. They're often charming, confident, and can seem incredibly competent. Their danger isn't in overt aggression, but in the slow erosion of your self-worth and boundaries. The weapons they use are pretty terrifying. First, they love bomb you. Making you feel like the most important person in the world. Then suddenly devalue everything about you. They'll gaslight you until you question your own reality. They'll use triangulation to create insecurity and competition between you and others. And perhaps worst of all, they'll use this thing called intermittent reinforcement that keeps you hooked on their approval. Look, I'm going to let you in on something most people completely miss. Pay close attention to how you feel after spending time with someone. Ever noticed that some people leave you feeling completely drained rather than energized? You might be dealing with a narcissist who's feeding off your emotional energy like a vampire. Has anyone here experienced that? Drop it in the comments. Here's the thing. While normal people try to be liked, the narcissist makes sure you need their approval to feel worthy. Huge difference. Machiavellianism. The next level manipulator. Now we're moving up to something more serious. What psychologists call Machiavellianism. Ever heard of Niccolo Machiavelli? He was the 16th century Italian diplomat who wrote The Prince, basically the original playbook for manipulation. These people take a calculating, strategic approach to human interactions, where the end always justifies the means. The Machiavellian personality? Think cold, strategic thinking. Manipulation for personal gain. Emotional detachment from their actions. A cynical worldview that assumes the worst of others. And patience. Incredible patience and long-term planning. Unlike narcissists who often act impulsively for attention, Machiavellians play the long game. They're willing to wait months or even years to execute a plan that advances their interests. Scary, right? I remember hearing about this woman. Let's call her Sophia. She was this seemingly unremarkable analyst at a competitive financial firm. She never drew attention to herself yet. Somehow always ended up on successful projects. Weird coincidence? Not at all. Behind the scenes, she meticulously collected information about colleagues' weaknesses and mistakes, not to use immediately, but to store away for the perfect moment. She was patient. When a prestigious position opened up, Sophia didn't apply directly. Instead, she subtly undermined the most qualified candidate through strategically shared concerns with decision makers. She had aligned herself with key influencers, having spent years building their trust. When she was eventually offered the position, everyone felt it was their idea to promote her. Classic Machiavellian move. What makes these people so dangerous is that they aren't impulsive. They're calculated. This makes their manipulation exceptionally difficult to detect until it's too late. While a narcissist might leave you feeling confused, a Machiavellian leaves no trace at all. Like carbon monoxide, their influence is deadly precisely because it's odorless and colorless. Their danger comes from several places. They're willing to exploit trust and vulnerability without a second thought. They can predict and manipulate social dynamics like they're playing chess. They have incredible patience in executing complex schemes, and perhaps worst of all, they feel absolutely no remorse for collateral damage. Honestly, if you want to protect yourself, be extremely wary of people who collect information but rarely share anything meaningful about themselves. Machiavellians gather personal details like ammunition for future use while keeping their own lives carefully guarded. Have you ever met someone like that? Where you realize you've told them your life story but know almost nothing about them? The average person sees relationships as connections. The Machiavellian sees them as transactions. Psychopathy, the truly terrifying one. And now, we get to the really scary one. I mean, this is the stuff that keeps me up at night. Psychopathy represents a fundamental disconnection from human emotion, particularly fear, guilt, and remorse. While clinical psychopathy has specific diagnostic criteria, subclinical psychopathic traits exist on a spectrum and are more common than many realize. You know the traits to look for? Shallow emotions and lack of empathy, fearlessness and thrill-seeking behavior, impulsivity and this constant need for stimulation, pathological lying, often early behavioral problems and juvenile delinquency, and this complete inability to form genuine attachments. There's this expert doctor, Robert Hare, who created the psychopathy checklist. He describes psychopaths as interspecies predators who use charm, manipulation, intimidation, and violence to control others and to satisfy their own selfish needs. That description still gives me chills. I heard about this guy. Let's call him James. He appeared to be everyone's ideal partner, attentive, exciting, and intensely passionate. But his relationships followed this predictable pattern. Swift seduction, escalating risk-taking behavior, sudden emotional withdrawal, followed by deliberate cruelty. The scary thing, his partners didn't see how he discussed them with derision behind their backs, how he precisely identified and exploited their insecurities, or how he felt absolutely nothing when they were devastated by his betrayals. The emotional devastation he caused wasn't an unfortunate side effect. It was the point. Their pain was one of the few things that made him feel something. In professional settings, James excelled in high-pressure environments where ruthlessness was rewarded. He took extreme risks that sometimes paid off spectacularly, making him appear like a visionary. When his gambles failed, he'd already planned his exit strategy, leaving others to deal with the consequences. Why are psychopaths so dangerous? They combine the worst aspects of the other Dark Triad traits: the manipulation of Machiavellianism with the callousness required to execute without remorse. Their danger comes from several places. They can mimic emotional connections they don't feel at all. They're willing to inflict harm for minimal gain or simple entertainment. They're completely immune to the fear of consequences. And they have an uncanny capacity to identify and target vulnerability. I want to share something really important with you. Trust your body's response. Ever had that experience where someone makes your stomach tighten or your throat constrict despite their outward charm? Your nervous system may be detecting danger your conscious mind hasn't yet processed. Don't ignore that feeling. While you're weighing moral implications, they're calculating risk versus reward. The composite Dark Triad, the ultimate nightmare. Now imagine someone who has all three of these traits. When all three combine in one individual, you're dealing with what researchers call a Dark Triad composite. Literally, the most dangerous personality type you're likely to encounter in your lifetime. These rare individuals operate with the narcissist's insatiable hunger for admiration, the Machiavellian's strategic manipulation skills, and the psychopath's complete absence of moral restraint. I want to tell you about someone I read about in a case study. Let's call them Alex. Alex founded a tech startup after identifying a perfect opportunity. Wealthy investors, eager to fund the next big thing, minimal regulatory oversight, and a technical field complex enough that few could evaluate their claims. Their narcissism drove them to create this messianic public image, presenting themselves as a visionary genius solving world-changing problems. Their Machiavellianism enabled them to craft elaborate networks of half-truths that no single person could fully verify, and their psychopathic traits freed them from anxiety about consequences or guilt about the inevitable collapse. When employees expressed concerns, Alex isolated and discredited them. When investors asked tough questions, Alex used technical jargon and appeals to the fear of missing out. When regulators investigated, Alex had already prepared multiple layers of plausible deniability. By the time the company imploded, Alex had already secured millions, crafted a narrative about being sabotaged by short-sighted stakeholders, and positioned themselves for their next venture with a new group of victims. Here's a critical piece of advice I learned the hard way. Be exceptionally cautious around individuals who seem to have a perfect explanation for everything, especially when those explanations consistently shift blame away from themselves while maintaining their image as exceptional. The average person fears failure. The Dark Triad composite has already planned for it as just another profit opportunity. The 7 warning signs most people miss. This is the one that 90% never notice. Okay, so how do you actually spot these people before they cause damage? That's the real challenge, because they've evolved to blend in, presenting a carefully crafted mask to the world while operating by entirely different rules beneath the surface. The most frequently missed sign, the one that 90% of people overlook, is the pity play combined with boundary testing. Let me explain what this looks like. Dark Triad individuals uniquely combine an appeal to your sympathy, presenting themselves as victims, while simultaneously testing small boundaries to see what they can get away with, and carefully observing which approach gets the most traction with you specifically. This combination is nearly impossible for most people to detect because it activates our compassion while disarming our defenses. You know that feeling when you feel both sorry for someone and slightly uncomfortable with their requests, but can't articulate why. Pay very close attention when that happens. So, what are these warning signs you need to watch for? One thing I've noticed is how they dominate conversations, but completely tune out when they are not the focus. It's almost like they can't maintain interest if they're not at the center. You ever noticed that with someone? Another major red flag is what I call the contextual personality. Their fundamental character seems to change dramatically, depending on who's in the room. Like they're wearing different masks for different audiences. I had a coworker like this once. It was like dealing with a completely different person, depending on who else was present. Oh, and you won't believe how common this next one is. The accelerated timeline. They push for rapid intimacy, commitment, or trust before it's naturally developed. If someone's rushing you into a deep relationship, that's a major warning. Something else to watch for is the pity-power dynamic. They alternate between appearing vulnerable to evoke your protection and powerful to command your respect. This emotional roller coaster is deliberate and incredibly effective at keeping you off balance. And here's the one most people miss. Intermittent reinforcement. They unpredictably switch between extreme charm and coldness, creating an addictive cycle that keeps you hooked. It's like a slot machine for emotions. You never know when you'll get the reward of their approval, so you keep coming back. They're also masters at creating isolated incidents. They ensure problematic behaviors appear disconnected, so patterns are difficult to identify. It's like they don't want you connecting the dots. And finally, pay attention to that intuitive discomfort alongside logical approval. Your gut says something's wrong, but on paper, everything checks out. This disconnect is your intuition trying to protect you. You know what really helped me when I was dealing with someone like this? I started keeping a private journal of our interactions. The pattern became clear over time in a way that isolated incidents never revealed. Try it if you suspect someone in your life has these traits. While the average person trusts their logical assessment, survivors of Dark Triad abuse learn to trust their intuition first. The science behind the darkness, before this information disappears. I need to be straight with you guys. What I'm about to share is typically locked behind academic paywalls and specialized psychological training. Due to how sensitive this is and potential misuse, similar content has been systematically removed from platforms like this one. So if you're finding this valuable, maybe download it or take notes, because honestly, I don't know how long I can keep this video up. So, what actually creates these dangerous personalities? This is one of psychology's most fascinating questions, and current research shows it's a complex mix of factors. The brain science behind this is mind-blowing. Scientists have done brain scans and found something shocking. People with these Dark Triad traits actually have different brain activity, particularly in regions associated with empathy, emotional processing, and impulse control. Psychopathy especially appears to have strong genetic components. I was watching this lecture when neuroscientist Dr. Kent Keel explained that psychopathic brains show reduced activity in the paralimbic system, which processes emotional responses. They literally don't feel what others feel. Can you imagine that? Here's something wild. When scientists use fMRI scans and show images of people in pain, they find that normal brains show activation in empathy centers. But psychopathic brains, they show activation in pleasure centers. And narcissistic brains show activation in self-reference regions. It's like they're literally wired differently. But it's not just about brain structure. Childhood experiences significantly influenced Dark Triad development. Narcissism often develops from either excessive praise without substance or severe emotional neglect. Machiavellianism can emerge from environments where manipulation was necessary for survival. And psychopathic traits may be enhanced by early trauma, inconsistent discipline, or attachment disruption. I was listening to this developmental psychologist, Dr. Carol McBride, who put it perfectly. These traits often begin as adaptive survival strategies in dysfunctional environments. What protected a child becomes destructive in an adult. Understanding the origins of these traits has actually helped me maintain compassion while still protecting myself. their damage to you is real, regardless of why they develop these characteristics. While most of us were learning connection as kids, the Dark Triad individual was learning survival at any cost. How to protect yourself. Becoming predator-proof. Understanding these personalities is just the first step. You need specific strategies to counter their manipulation techniques. One technique that saved me in unavoidable situations is what psychologists call the gray rock method. When you can't avoid these people, you basically become as uninteresting and unresponsive as possible to manipulation attempts. By providing minimal emotional reactions, you become a boring target not worth the effort. I was at this workshop where clinical psychologist Dr. Perpetua Neo explained, Gray rock works because Dark Triad personalities feed on emotional reactions. Without that fuel, they'll often move on to more responsive targets. So, how do you actually do this? Keep conversations basic and factual. Avoid sharing personal information or emotions. Use neutral facial expressions and tone. Deflect personal questions with bland responses. And most importantly, don't engage with provocations or baiting. Another strategy I found incredibly effective, especially with Machiavellians, is what I call the documentation defense. This provides protection against gaslighting and reputation attacks. Save emails, text messages, and when legal, record conversations. Take dated notes after significant interactions. Communicate important matters in writing. Identify witnesses to problematic behaviors. And maintain evidence of your own performance and conduct. Something else that's absolutely critical is creating what I call a reality check network. You need to maintain connections with trusted individuals outside the Dark Triad person's influence who can provide perspective when your reality testing is compromised. Create what I call a sanity check system. Regular check-ins with trusted friends, unconnected to the situation. Therapy with a professional experienced in manipulation dynamics. Participation in support groups for similar experiences. Journaling to track patterns over time. And predetermined red lines that will trigger you to seek help. And finally, the most critical defense, what I've come to call the vulnerability audit. Dark Triad individuals are experts at identifying and exploiting specific vulnerabilities. Understanding your own attachment style, need for validation, or fear of abandonment helps you recognize when these buttons are being pushed. Ask yourself, what past wounds am I still sensitive about? What do I most fear in relationships? What compliments am I most hungry to hear? What criticisms would devastate me? What would I compromise my values to avoid losing? And here's a bonus tip I learned from a former FBI negotiator. I call it the Rule of 3 verification system. When making important decisions about someone, require 3 separate pieces of evidence that contradict their claimed identity or intentions before fully trusting them. One contradiction might be a misunderstanding. 2 could be coincidence, but 3 forms a pattern that deserves your attention. While the average person hopes for the best, the survivor of Dark Triad manipulation prepares for the worst while still living fully. Dark Triad in the digital age, the modern playground. Okay, now this is where things get really interesting. Technology has created the perfect hunting ground for Dark Triad personalities. It's like we've built them the ultimate playground, and most of us have no idea. Just think about social media for a second. It's basically narcissistic supply on tap. Unlimited validation through likes and comments. Perfect control over how they present themselves. Instant audience whenever they need attention. And tools to monitor others while staying hidden themselves. You know what's crazy? Studies show narcissism rates have increased by 25% since social media took over our lives. Researchers at the University of Michigan found direct links between how much time people spend on these platforms and their narcissistic traits. Not surprising when you think about it, right? This next one actually keeps me up at night. Modern dating apps are like a psychopath's dream come true. Access to countless potential victims without anyone watching. Ability to manipulate multiple people at the same time. Super easy love bombing through texts and DMs. Perfect platform for disappearing and reappearing whenever they want. And complete freedom to fake their entire identity. A study just last year found that people scoring high on Dark Triad tests were 3 times more likely to use dating apps to exploit others rather than find actual relationships. Let that sink in for a second. That person who ghosted you after an intense connection. Maybe it wasn't about you at all. And with everyone working from home now, Machiavellians have new opportunities. It's way easier to control what information goes to which colleagues, simple to record and document other people's mistakes. No one sees the behind-the-scenes manipulation. Much easier to present different personas to different groups, and everything's in writing, which they can craft perfectly. Listen, if you remember nothing else from this video, remember this. Create a 48-hour rule for any request that makes you feel rushed or pressured. Dark Triad people. Rely on bypassing your logical thinking by creating fake emergencies. Don't fall for it. Here's the reality. While normal people see technology as a way to connect, Dark Triad individuals see it as the ultimate weapon for exploitation. Final thoughts. What you need to remember. Understanding. The Dark Triad isn't about becoming paranoid or cynical. It's about developing psychological immunity to manipulation. By recognizing these dangerous personalities early, you can maintain stronger boundaries and make more informed decisions about who deserves your trust. There's this amazing book called The Sociopath Next Door by psychologist Dr. Martha Stout, where she writes, "The most reliable sign of a dangerous personality is not aggression or intelligence or charm. It's the pity play. The ability to appeal to your sympathy even as they harm you is the true mark of someone to fear." Remember that while 1% of the population may qualify as clinical psychopaths, subclinical Dark Triad traits exist on a spectrum that touches many more. The person sitting across from you at work, the charming new friend, or even the passionate new romantic interest might be operating according to an entirely different rulebook than you imagine. Have you already encountered these personalities without realizing it? Let's do a quick check right now. Have you ever found yourself constantly walking on eggshells around someone who occasionally treats you amazingly well? Have you been in a relationship where you kept hoping the real person, the charming, loving one, would come back for good? Has someone ever made you question your own memories or perceptions of events you were absolutely certain about? Do you feel completely drained after spending time with someone who, on paper, seems impressive or charming? Has someone's sad backstory made you ignore red flags in how they treat you? If you said yes to 3 or more, listen closely. You've probably already encountered a Dark Triad personality, and you're not alone. The comments section is probably going to fill up with people sharing similar experiences. The real question isn't whether you'll meet these dangerous people. It's whether you'll spot them before they spot you. What would change in your life if you could see the warning signs earlier? Maybe everything. Like, quick disclaimer. I'm sharing this information for educational and protective purposes only. Remember that these traits exist on a spectrum, and having some traits doesn't automatically make someone dangerous, but recognizing the patterns can help protect you from those who would take advantage of your trust. Dave, want to dive deeper into psychological defense strategies most people will never learn? Look, what I've shared today barely scratches the surface. For those of you who want to really protect yourselves in this increasingly manipulative world, I've put together some resources. Join my exclusive newsletter, The Inner Circle. Check out our private community, Dark Psychology Defense Network. And don't forget to smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you'll know immediately when I drop new protection strategies. Let's be real. Content like this that actually tells the truth doesn't usually stay up long. Most platforms systematically remove videos that reveal these insights, even when they're meant to protect you. Every day, the gap between those who understand these dynamics and those who don't gets wider. Which side would you rather be on? That's all for today. If you found this helpful, please hit that like button and share with someone who needs to hear this. Until next time, stay aware out there.